Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a good MIPFormat so far. Welcome to what I think is the most interesting panel of the session, but I'm a little bit biased. I'm Hayley Babcock from A&E Networks International. Ooh. And it's so electric, I just shut everything down. Please welcome our panelists for today. We have Dave Broome, the president of 24/7.
25/7, don't take an hour away from me.
I'm so sorry, I know that. Why did I just say that? It's 25/7, my mistake, I'm so sorry. Jonathan Tuovinen, who is the COO and the head of international at Rabbit Films. We have Lauren Anderson, the chief content officer of the brand newly minted NBC Snap joint venture. And we have Tom Wright, whom some of you may know from an earlier session, the CEO of Vertical Networks. Before we get into the back and forth and really what I think is going to be a fascinating discussion, some of our panelists would like to tell you a little bit and show you a little bit about themselves. So Dave of 25/7 Productions, please, would you like to start us out?
Well, I'll do very quick. We put 25/7 together back in 2003. That was the year before I created and executive produced The Biggest Loser, so that timing worked out well for us. And we're known for our big formats. For the most part, very large-scale formats. Ultimate Beastmaster, which is a clip that we're going to play right now, is our newest one. It's a series that we are about to enter our third season on Netflix. So if you want, we can play it.
All around the world, a special breed of athletes are chasing destiny.
All with the full belief that they have what it takes to conquer the most physically demanding, jaw-dropping obstacle course in history.
It is the beast.
The beast.
La bestia.
Das Beast.
La bestia.
It is the beast.
And this season, everything has changed.
That's the way you go after that!
He's not gonna bump. He's not gonna bump. It's an all-new
The beast swallowed you!
tournament-style competition.
Look at the determination.
That will push athletes to their limits.
He hurt his shoulder. Each qualifying round will feature one athlete from each of our 9 competing countries.
It's game time.
Every set of warriors will face their own unique, menacing beast. This is called Shapeshifter. That's wheel power. It's called Rope Burn. That's Crankshaft. This is Gearhead.
The beast gets fierce with the stabilizer.
Beast, nimm dich vor mir in Acht, denn ich werde dich auseinandernehmen.
Applause, welcome. Jonathan, would you like to say a couple of words and show us a little something?
Sure, thanks, Hayley. So my name is Jonathan Tuovinen, and I'm the COO and head of international at Rabbit Films. Rabbit Films is an independent production and distribution company based in Helsinki in Finland, and we have offices in Los Angeles as well. Now, in Finland, in our home territory, we're a big production company that does a lot of entertainment shows, reality shows, talk shows, and so on. But we're a bit of an anomaly in the sense that we've been doing our own distribution. And we have an office in LA that's been selling our own created shows to the US market. And last year, we managed to do a sale of Ultimate Expedition, which originally aired on MTV3, which is a large linear channel in Finland, to YouTube Red. And I have a little clip of Ultimate Expedition US.
I love this. 1, 2, 3.
You will try to climb a 20,000-foot mountain that is called Toklara. If you're not healthy enough or if you don't have the physical capability, you will be eliminated.
My ankle is held together with lots of screws. Is that a problem?
I think one screw might be a little loose. Welcome to the top of the world.
Thank you. And so in addition to creating the format, Rabbit Films also produced the show in the US as well.
Thank you. Now, Lauren, because your company is so brand new, I know you don't have anything to show us yet, but would you like to say a couple of words?
Of course. Thanks, Hayley. Thanks, everyone, for coming. So the NBC Snap joint venture, which we announced here in the fall, we actually are so new that we're going into production on our first series as we speak. So hopefully, if I'm invited back at some other point, we will have clips to show. But we are primarily focused, we're a joint venture funded both by NBC and Snapchat, primarily focused on scripted content, although we will do a few unscripted things as well. And at this point, we have things from everywhere. So we're looking at formats, we're a lot of original development. So I think this conversation is going to be very interesting, especially in terms of how we're viewing content and the sorts of things we think make sense to produce for Snapchat primarily and potentially for other platforms in the future.
Great, thank you. And last, certainly not least, Tom?
So I head up Vertical Networks. We're based in LA. I guess like Lauren, we make stuff for Snapchat as well as Facebook. I think we've got 7 series with Snapchat at the moment. And yeah, I guess we make lots of their bigger shows. Our focus is on digital-first formats which are designed to travel. So everything we make, the expectation is that we can then kind of go and sell those internationally for television. And I think this is just a general overview of our slate.
You ever sat down and binged all your movies at once before?
No. Get to the chopper!
Get to the chopper!
I don't really know why I'm here today. This is the moment I'm gonna tell my cousin about my secret. Just say it.
Have you ever been talking to someone and then they disappear?
I thought we had something and then just ghosted.
Would you let someone look through your phone on a first date?
Why was he looking at that?
What kind of scandalous things are in here?
Oh, it's definitely an inappropriate photo in here.
Click it again.
Thanks, Tom. So the audience here, as we know, we are probably mostly linear, legacy media, broadcast network executives and creatives and distributors. The new digital players are getting more and more heavily into the format space, the scripted and the unscripted world. And the question now is, how do we, in the legacy world, work together with those Netflixes, YouTube Reds, Snapchats, Googles, Facebooks? Is this change where those digital players are able to analyze and assess what the viewers want exactly and differs so differently from the way we're used to? Is this world in which those players do deals differently than deals that people in this room are probably used to? Is that something that is creating more upheaval or more opportunity? That's really what we want to talk about here today. So, Tom, let's start with you, because you started your career in the classic linear broadcast universe, and then you moved over to digital. Tell us a little bit more about that and how that relates to how it differs, how it's the same, and how your focus is on formats and how it differs from your focus on formats in the broadcast world.
So I started at Sky in the UK, I think about 10 years ago, and Vertical, I think we've been operating now for just over 2 years. I think there's all manner of difference, and my shorthand kind of answer to the bigger question is there's all manner of upheaval, both now and headed our way in the future, and both opportunity and challenge that come with all of those kind of changes. But I guess for me, the fundamental positive spin on where we're at, which is kind of how we focus and why we've built our company, we've gone from a world where, I guess because it was a closed wall kingdom, you had a show which was kind of pretty binary. There was a success or there was a failure. And I don't know what learnings you could take from that other than you did a good job or you didn't do a great job. The positive that we take from kind of the way we operate with a partner like Snapchat or Facebook, for example, because you have the data, I mean, everyone talks about data. Obviously, they've got unparalleled audience data. But as a programmer for those platforms, they don't keep that secret from you. You get access to that data. So if you look at what we've built, the efficacy of kind of the success of the shows we've made is based on the fact that we can optimize and refine based on the learnings that we gather. So I think you're never going to compete with these platforms when it comes to kind of general aggregation of data. If I was a broadcaster, I'd have a very different answer. But as a content creator, I think what's really exciting is you can build your own content taxonomy. You can get incredible audience insights linked to the content you're making and then refine. And out of that, if you kind of have the discipline in the architecture to kind of refine and optimize based on those metrics, you should be able to kind of to win.
Okay. Lauren, you're coming from the classic broadcast world and going into digital in a slightly different way, with mobile maybe not being your ultimate or initial focus. I don't know. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, how what you're looking at is the same as what Tom was talking about, or how it may differ?
Sure. So when I started in media, I actually started at the studio, at NBC Studio, back when it was known as NBC Universal Television Studio, and then had or have been at the network for many years. So when I took on this role, it was a bit like going home for me. I am a studio executive, I think, at heart, and so that part of it was very natural and felt very comfortable and was a language I understood very well. I would say that the sort of transition from traditional or linear to digital, or when you're talking about Snapchat, really you're talking about mobile more than you're saying digital. That transition has been interesting in that, and it's a bit of what Tom was saying, that you're thinking about the audience so much from the very beginning concept, and having that sort of data available all the time, it allows you to shapeshift, I think, much more quickly than maybe you would in a traditional linear platform. I think for me, though, to the question you were asking at the very top, for me, it's all opportunity. So there are challenges with any new business, and for us in growing a new studio and figuring out the content that we want to make that reflects the studio, and that is exactly what Snapchat wants and needs. There's always going to be that process. But the opportunity, especially when it comes to working with writers and creating inroads, we're focused on scripted, and so for me, I'm working with, you can't even put a number on it in terms of how many more writers you're able to give opportunities to, how many more people, how many more ideas are able to make it through the door. And I think part of that is because on mobile, there's always a need. You run through content very quickly and you need to replenish very quickly. So that's been incredibly exciting for me.
Okay, thank you. Dave, you come from the producing side, the creative producing side, and I think you did something recently, with Beastmasters, that a lot of people in this room would love to be able to do, which was
lose money.
Yeah. No, they're good at that. You were able to go into Netflix, do a long-form piece, different from what both Tom and Lauren are talking about at the moment, go into long-form, get a format going, but it was different. The way you did a format was different. Tell us a bit about
Yeah, well, look, there's a great opportunity if you're a content creator, producer, and it's an upheaval if you're on the broadcast side. But I think that's also an opportunity, to Lauren's point. I think you have, coming from traditional linear media, like an NBC, CBS, ABC, where we were making shows, it's a bit more formulaic as to what we had to do, how we have to make it. When we're creating it for Netflix, there's all bets are kind of off, and there's no set format. There's no set specific, hey, episode 1 needs to look like episode 2, which needs to feel like episode 3. That's not there. We can run a show that's 64 minutes in episode 1 as a premiere. We can run a show that's 39 minutes because it's a better piece of content for episode 2. That's fantastic and fabulous. When I created Ultimate Beastmaster, Netflix is a global platform. They're in 190 countries at one time. I specifically had this concept of taking advantage of an Olympic type of a competition, because that's where they are. When you're all at one time and streaming all episodes at one time, and you're in all these languages, why not build a format around that? So Beastmaster was specifically made for Netflix with that in mind, where we have 6, or in this 3rd season, 9 different languages. So I'm adjusting to what that platform's audience is. In this sense, in this way, it's a global platform. If you're making a show for Apple or Snap, it might not be global. They might want to concentrate on specific areas. So for me, for Netflix, for any content creators out there, I think that's one thing that you need to keep in mind is what are they really looking for as far as a broad audience? And they want to try to hit as many countries at one time and really have a mass global appeal. So that was a big shift from sitting there and saying, hey, we're going to make The Biggest Loser for NBC and only worry about what happens at 8 o'clock at night on a Tuesday night to a U.S. audience, and then do our international format sales, which we had at one time about 130 different territories, maybe a little bit more than that for Biggest Loser. So we had a huge global success, but that came years later. On day 1 for Ultimate Beastmaster, you're in 190 countries on day 1. So it's a different mind shift.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And hopefully very hope-giving to a lot of the people, you know, in this auditorium.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity. It's an exciting time.
And Jonathan, you did something that I think everybody in this auditorium would also like to hear more about and be able to do, which was, as you mentioned, you took Ultimate Expedition from a broadcast network, classic broadcast network, and you sold it as a format to YouTube Red, to a digital player. Tell us a bit about what, you know, without going into specific deal terms, but how does that differ? How did that kind of relationship differ from the relationship you would have selling your format to another broadcast network? And how did that open doors for you creatively and in terms of your business?
Great. Well, first of all, I come from a pure distribution background, so I used to be at NBC Universal. And the great thing about formats, obviously, is that, you know, it gives your client a way better look about what their show is going to look like. So, you know, we take care of our own distribution. So when we, for example, took Ultimate Expedition to YouTube Red, we were able to show them the full season and say, this is the show that we can make for you. And, you know, that's a competitive advantage, and that's something that worked in our favor. I'd say that from a production company perspective, you know, this is an amazing time, and these are incredible opportunities for us. So, you know, like if our US production entity that had never produced a full-length series in the US ever went to an NBC or a CBS and said, hi, you know, can we produce your biggest non-scripted show ever? You know, we probably wouldn't get even into that room. Whereas, you know, at a Netflix or at a YouTube Red or this type of new client, you know, they have an open mind. They don't have set you know, rules that they need to apply to, and you know, in this case, we were able to do that and even produce it ourselves. So, you know, we're really happy, and you know, this has been a strategy that we've been pursuing in the US for the last couple of years, and you know, we finally had a breakthrough, and it paid off. You know, now we're working on several other new projects since the first one's kind of started off. So really, really, yeah, exciting times.
I think Jonathan is so right on that. I really do. I mean, for anyone out there who would not get the opportunity to walk into an NBC or CBS, there is that opportunity to walk into these players now, and that's really exciting.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I'd like to ask something. So we're talking about shows and projects that are going on to these digital platforms. Do you see opportunity for things that start on a digital platform, things that you may be working on, things that you've seen happen, having a real format life, a robust existence back into the legacy world of broadcast and linear television? I open it up to whomever.
Not if it's on Netflix. Because,
okay, yeah.
No, I mean that because,
no, that's true.
Because they're buying the global rights. The rights to the format come off the table.
And increasingly, Facebook do the same thing. So I think it's all about the platform. So with Snapchat, we've very consciously kind of doubled down on that platform for that very reason. So,
okay.
Of the 6 original series we made last year, I think at least 2, maybe 3 will be going to television. So our model is predicated on exactly that. But increasingly, everybody is buying global rights. So I guess the challenge with working with a partner like Snapchat is it's a different kind of revenue model, but the opportunity is you have the opportunity to then take that format and kind of sell it globally.
Talk maybe a little bit more about what you are doing in terms of development. If you're developing for short form, but you have an eye to long form, does that change your process in terms of your development at the beginning? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we've got a series of kind of hoops that the team have to jump through for us to invest the time and money in the shows we make. So we publish every day on Snapchat, for example. Initially, I think we've got one channel live at the moment, but there's others coming. And so we've got an audience of about 50 million people a month that we engage with. And then out of the kind of opportunities we identify with that audience, we'll then come up with conceits for unscripted formats. But anything that we turn into a show, we have to have a very clear sense of what that format looks like as a piece of television.
Okay.
So anything we make, I could pitch you the digital version, but also what we do to turn that into a piece of television.
Okay, thank you.
And
Who
I
else?
I think for us on the scripted side, and part of this is, I'm sure, comes from the fact that I came from NBC and came from the studio world, and so those are the writers I know. Those are the relationships I have. That's the level at the agencies with whom I'm speaking, and so I'm always dealing with television writers. And so for me, it's very much about allowing them and helping them to see what the opportunity is. And it hasn't been that difficult. Everyone understands what the opportunity is and what exists for them at Snapchat. But their default mode is actually creating television series, sort of traditional linear television series for the vast majority of people I'm working with. And if it's not on the writer side, then on the producer side. So either way, I think we're very naturally set up and have always had a mind towards that. I think it's the other thing that happens when you're a joint venture, and so you have a media company that is very much the sort of more traditional linear media company. So we're bringing that perspective, and I think that, let's hope that expertise to the table.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of flip the question about distribution rights the other way around as well. So in a way, you can also see it as an opportunity where a Netflix can suddenly produce a show that's meant for several different territories, but they can also produce same versions, local versions of that same format into different territories. Or, YouTube Red can, take the Germans up the mountain in their next venture. So in a way, like, you could get more out of it than if you sold just, territory by territory. And also, like, if you compare to production company conglomerates, so in a way, like, if you're an Endemol or you're a Fremantle, and, you have production companies all over the world, in a way, when you create a format, your rights are tied to that company anyway. So in this case, it's just a broadcaster that's a digital one. So we just see it as a good thing.
Do you foresee second windowing going in the opposite direction? It's traditionally been, it first goes on to the broadcast networks, and a second window is given to the Netflix and Hulus of the world. But do you foresee it potentially, and have you had conversations about it going the other way around, where it launches digitally first, and after a certain period of time, it can be produced locally for traditional broadcaster?
Yeah, I think we would love that. Obviously, I think a lot of these players, these are the first time the deals are being made. So, you don't have a template. And a lot of times, yeah, the rights are taken worldwide, maybe in perpetuity as well. But I would say that, like, in the next couple of years, as these opportunities start to arise, so, like, let's say, the FAANGS will start doing their own distribution, maybe. Or if suddenly, you have a producer or distribution company who owns parts of the rights, and they come and say, listen, we have the opportunity to get an extra $100,000, $200,000 per episode if we just, in a year's time, give it to German and Chinese and Australian broadcasters. There could be a chance, especially if the show hasn't been renewed, that they would say yes. So I think it's a developing issue.
Dave, let me ask you something. You are working in the traditional and the digital space right now, whereby it's not short form that you're doing
that's right.
For the time being. A lot of people in the market, let's say that you need very different muscles and very different kind of person to develop for the digital world than you do being somebody who develops in the traditional world. Speak to that in terms of short form and long form, and I'm going to ask each of you to maybe speak to that.
I say yes and no. I mean, Netflix, when Ultimate Beastmaster was the very first format, unscripted, that they ever put on. It's changed in a year. They didn't even have an unscripted department when I first sold the show. Now, they're bursting at the seams. At first, Netflix was looking to do just premium content on all sides, unscripted, scripted, everything. Now, they've become all things to all people. They're mass. So they're a network. They're just like any other network. So I would say, as a creator, I don't know how different of a mindset you need between a CBS, ABC, and a Netflix. What I do think you need to think about is if your format is going to go on a streamer like Netflix, where all episodes are going to be available at one time, you need to try to think about how you're going to capitalize on that and how you're going to get people to binge your series. That's one thing. I have 3 or 4 series that's coming out on Netflix, which we just haven't announced yet. And that's the thing that I'm losing sleep on, or I used to lose sleep on waking up the next morning and going, holy crap, what are the ratings going to be? When I went up against Kobe Bryant's last game in the NBA, and a Tuesday at 8 o'clock, and there was all this other stuff that had competition against me. Now I'm losing sleep on, am I getting this audience to tune in at any time they want to Netflix, see my series, see my format, and move from one episode to the next? And that's the mindset I think that you have to have that's different than the traditional linear.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I think with the example of Ultimate Expedition, what was quite different as well is that in addition to the main show that actually airs once a week, so you have to wait for a week for it to come on. So we used YouTube celebrities who all have their own channels. And in addition to the main show, each of them were creating 2 pieces of short-form content that went together with the episode that was going out that week. So in a sense, all together, we had like 180 different clips. And that's something that you don't normally need to consider or to take into account. It was quite exciting, kind of creating an ecosystem of content from from the show and from the stars and talents that were attached to it.
Thank you.
I think that perhaps you have to tap into a different skill set sometimes, and so perhaps maybe the transition for me, for example, when I was a studio executive and then being a network executive, what are the differences there? But in terms of what we're trying to create, and let me also just say that obviously if you're making things that are shorter, you have to be far more efficient with the storytelling. Ultimately though, and I think Snapchat in particular I'm speaking about, we're focused on premium content, and so from that standpoint, some of the fundamentals are the same. And so you want to lean into those things. We are a writers first studio, and we talk about that a lot. So there are some differences for sure, and I think, and being able to respond to that, being able to understand how to create things that need to be much more paced up than, let's say, what you're doing. You have 5 minutes versus 25, linear, et cetera. But you're still trying to tell a really great story, have really great characters. And again, I'm speaking from the scripted side, really great characters, really great story, something that brings people back episode by episode. So you're tapping into those same things for sure.
Okay.
And maybe a nuanced version of Dave's answer. So I think context is everything. So our focus is very much, we're vertical networks because we focus on people consuming content on their handsets. I think Netflix is probably an edge case in that Netflix is as close as you've got to a broadcast experience. Right? So that's the best stuff that you could find that historically might have been on television. But if you think about platforms like YouTube, and Facebook, and Snapchat, social platforms, the context in which your content is going to be served isn't something that you can ignore or avoid. So I guess, if we go into efficacy, which I guess lots of this is about, the reason our content's disproportionately successful is because lots of people who play with these platforms take something that they think would have worked on television and slightly rework it and throw it up without really ever understanding the nuances of behaviors or audiences that exist on those platforms. So I think for me, the focus, if there's a kind of shift in behavior or learning, it's about acknowledging that you're going to need to understand the behaviors before you try and program for these people, because they're very, very different.
Great piece of advice.
Really great point.
Really great piece of advice. I'd like to bring up something else that's probably Jonathan can speak to maybe most directly, but I'd like all of your opinions on this if you have one. some of the people sitting in here are not producers and creatives, they're distributors. And I'm wondering what you think, and if you think, the value chain of the format business, because we are talking to a format-focused audience. Can the value chain of the format business be maintained and thrive with the increasing popularity of these platforms? And if so, how? If not, why not?
Well, hopefully it can, because otherwise I won't have a job in a year. No, absolutely, I believe it can. So first of all, to my earlier point, I think that you know, it's a changing landscape. So the way things are going right now, if you have the black and white picture of, okay, you know, you sell your show's rights to a Netflix and then that's it forever, I don't think that that's going to be the case in a year or 2 years' time. That there'll definitely be, you know, second windows, there'll definitely be tape sales, there'll definitely be all different kinds of things. But just from a very, very practical perspective, honestly, like when you're a distribution company, you know, you have certain shows in your catalog that sell extremely well. You have others that maybe sell a bit less. I'm sure there's distribution companies that have loads of things in their catalog that they've never sold. So, you know, if you have something like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or, you know, The Biggest Loser, which you know that, okay, we'll sell this to 100 linear broadcasters and make several $1 million off of it, especially if we produce it, fine, maybe don't sell that to a Netflix. But, you know, that still keeps 90% of the rest of your catalog up for grabs. So I would say that there's a lot of content that you can still place with this type of distribution, with this type of platforms with no problems. And I'd say that, like, you know, we launched Ultimate Expedition as a traditional format. You know, it was on Fresh TV 2 years ago. We sold the show to like options around the world. We had a really good partnership with Warner Brothers. And, you know, like in the end, if someone asks you, you know, should you sell a couple of options less, possibly a few licenses, or do you want to produce a show for a huge international player? It's a very simple question, both from a creative and from a financial perspective.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a perspective on that?
My view would be, it's great to have more buyers, right? Because that's what we're really talking about. In the medium term, there are definitely more buyers, and I'd say in the long term, we talk about Hulu and Netflix as kind of outlier OTT premium platform, but one would imagine that in the long term, certainly medium term, we'll see 2 or 3 other similar platforms emerge. To your point about, I guess, the dual sales piece, we've had an interesting journey. We launched a show on Facebook Watch, which I think Electus, now that I think they're probably here, the distributor, have just picked up to kind of now sell to linear broadcast. We haven't done it that way, as in used a distributor for the sales piece yet, so it's going to be an interesting journey. But I think that there's enough kind of value and enough buyers in the market to suggest that this isn't going to get to a world where you sell the thing once. I think it's realistic to think that we're going to have windows, it's just going to be a different kind of shape to the current ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. We're getting close to the end of the session. I'd like to open it up just to see, is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that any one of you thinks is really valuable to bring up or talk about or raise here right now as part of thinking about the format world and the digital world merging and colliding?
I'll just say, I think, you know, there's a trade-off. You know, the beauty of working with someone like a Netflix is you're getting right to series. You're taking the format off the table, but you're getting your episodes put on around the world. And you're not dealing with typically a pilot episode and focus testing that and hoping that you're going to get that on the air. So you just need to keep that in mind. There's the question of, do you hold back the format, try to sell to a linear, or do you sit and go to a Netflix and say, look, I'm going to get a series, 8, 10 episodes put on right away, but not be able to take the format sales? And that's the dilemma. It's a pure business decision. For me, it's a pure creative decision, because I want to put the show on Netflix if I feel like it's going to have a global appeal, and I'd rather just try to make a hit and not worry about the international format sales, quite honestly. I'll just take that off the table, but have a series that hopefully goes 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 seasons deep on a Netflix.
Very interesting, brave new world, sort of. Okay, panelists, I'd like to ask you to think about if you have a piece of advice to give the people sitting in this room with regard to moving forward and maybe keeping one leg in the traditional linear space and putting one leg into the digital space, what might that be? I know I'm putting you on the spot right now, but give yourself the advice and then just say it out loud. You know, what do you want to?
Well, I don't think you need to choose. I mean, I feel like we have an amazing opportunity out there. So you should be making shows and distributing shows for everybody and anybody. I don't think it's an either or. The new FAANGS are just part of the CBS's, NBC's, ABC's in the States, the Channel 4s or BBC's and ITV's in the UK. It's just, they're just more. More is more.
My view would be, just building on that context point, there's definitely been a period of time where the way this stuff traditionally worked was you'd pitch the good stuff to television and then you'd take the leftovers to whoever was left over. And I think pitching the right project to the right partner, again, we're just talking about more buyers. So I think if you're Toby at Facebook or if you're Sean over at Snap, it's very clear if you're giving those guys an idea that's been shopped around and there's no other home for it, so they're the last stop on the train. I think just personally, were I just entering this world, my view would just be don't pitch shit. So like, if you
good advice.
If you have things
Words
which
to live by.
you know aren't great, well, don't share them. And if you have a project which feels an incredible fit for any one of these platforms, pitch it there.
I think that's a great point and extends on the scripted side. The belief that there are digital shows and linear shows or traditional shows, I think is a little bit outdated. And so when you're thinking about your content, we want great stuff. We want really amazing things that can live in a number of places. The sorts of things that I'm working on right now and things that we have in development, a number of those things are being developed, as we were talking about before, with an eye towards linear, perhaps for reasons that have nothing to do with believing that linear is a better home or better place, or that the content or quality is better, but just because it's another opportunity, it's another windowing opportunity. But the point is, for us, it's not, you have to sculpt your show for the platform, but the quality of what you're sending should be great.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my piece of advice would just be to be brave, because there are so many opportunities out there, as we've all been saying. And like today we're talking about how to work with FAANGS and what's it going to be like in 2020. But in 2020, this is going to be the new normal, and we're going to have a whole new set of new platforms and new people who are commissioning content, and it's going to change all the time. So I don't think we need to, or don't get stuck on the old models and just kind of go out there and push your ideas and push your content.
Dave?
I agree, with what everyone is saying here. At the end of the day, you need to be driven by your passion. What do you think about your project? Where does it belong? Who's going to crush it for you? What's going to get a hit? Because that's what it's about. And Tom said it. Don't pitch shit. That for me, if I don't believe that I've got the best thing in the world, and I really do believe it every single time I go into a room, because otherwise I'm not walking in, then I'm not going in. And the FAANGS right now, especially, they're looking for a high quality. For the most part right now, they need really high glossy stuff. As you're seeing, Netflix launched their scripted series with House of Cards. And they did the same thing in their unscripted series with Ultimate Beastmaster. These are big shows, big glossy shows. That's what a lot of these people are looking for, and I would say go in with that.
And I would say too, just to throw my 2 cents in there, we're in an industry where we've always had to change, and the entertainment industry has always had to change and adapt. But television didn't kill film, which everybody was worried about hundreds of years ago when television came about. And MP3s didn't kill the music industry. The music industry had to change and make a shift, but it is still thriving. It's just thriving in a different way. I think, creativity will always win, and entertainment will always be valued and consumed, and multiple platforms will always be able to thrive and survive together. And I can't imagine that it's any different for us now. So it's just about getting creative and keeping things moving forward and keeping your ideas fresh, whether it comes to deal making or creative development. And I suspect we'll be talking about all of this in 2020, which is not that long from now, believe it or not. I want to thank you all very much for this really interesting conversation. It's been fabulous listening to all of you, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of MIP.